Hello everybody, welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we'll be analyzing the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 21st of September 2018. The topics to be covered today has been presented on the screen. Timestamping for the same has been given in the comment section below. Let's start our today's discussion. Now this particular article has been taken from page number 9. The title of the article is the NITI AAYOG Relevant Today? This article shall be important from the perspective of GS Paper 3 under the subsection Indian Economy and Various Issues. Let's understand the focus of this particular article. As you know, one of the major reform of the present government has been the replacement of the erstwhile Planning Commission by the NITI AAYOG. The NITI AAYOG here stands for National Institute for Transforming India. So this particular article basically analyzes whether the NITI AAYOG has been able to fulfill its objectives. Now, as you can see here, the first part of the article states that the NITI AAYOG has been broadly able to fulfill its objectives. However, the second part of the article states that there are certain deficiencies with respect to the working of the NITI AAYOG, because of which it has unable to fulfill the objectives with which it has been created. So as part of this video analysis, firstly, we will try to understand as to what are the reasons for replacing the Planning Commission by NITI AAYOG. Secondly, we will analyze whether the NITI AAYOG has been able to fulfill its objectives. And in order to analyze the second part, we will take the positives highlighted from the first part of the article and the negatives highlighted in the second part of the article. Let us now start with the first part, that is the reasons for replacing Planning Commission by NITI AAYOG. Now, in order to understand as to why Planning Commission has been replaced by NITI AAYOG, first let us understand as to how the planning in India has changed since LPG reforms of 1991. So from 1947 to 1991, our economy was more of a closed economy. This means that in India, public sector was given more dominant role, whereas the private sector was asked to play a supporting role for the public sector. And here, with respect to nature of planning, the dominant role was played by the government, wherein the government acted as planner, financer as well as implementer, which means as part of planning, the government was required to lay down the targets to be met for each and every sector for the economy. And once the targets are laid down, government used to allocate money for all the sectors accordingly. And finally, the implementation of the programs in order to meet the targets was done by the public sector undertakings. Now you can better understand this concept by looking at this particular example. Let's say here the government intends to construct national highways as part of 5-year plans. So earlier the government used to lay down the target for constructing national highways. Let's say here the target which is laid on is construction of 50,000 kilometers of national highways. Accordingly, the government used to allocate the money, and finally the construction of national highways used to be done by National Highway Authority of India. So this kind of planning is also referred to as imperative planning, wherein the government plays a dominant role, and the role of the government is that of planner, financer as well as implementer. However, the nature of planning in India has undergone a drastic change from the year 1991. Let us now understand as to how the planning has got changed. Now, because of LPG reforms in India, our economy has become more of open economy. It means that now the public sector is playing a lesser role, whereas the role of the private sector has enhanced. So as the role of public and private sector has changed because of the LPG reforms, there has been change with respect to nature of planning as well. As you can see here, now the role of government is confined to that of a planner. That means now the government would be required to lay down the targets for all the sectors. However, once the targets are laid down, now the private sector would be required to act like a financer as well as the implementer. Now this kind of planning in India is also referred to as indicative planning. So under the indicative planning, the government must indicate the targets to be met for each and every sector, and once the targets are met, the government has to act like a coordinator, facilitator and enabler for the private sector, so that the private sector acts like a financer as well as implementer. To understand this, let's go back to the previous example of construction of national highways. Now here, under the indicative planning, the government will be still laying down the targets with respect to construction of national highways in the 5-year plans. However, once the targets are laid down, the private sector shall be spending the money for the construction of national highways, as well as they shall be the one who shall be constructing the national highways. Now, in order to ensure that the private sector provides for the funds and construction, the government is required to act like a coordinator, facilitator and enabler. So here, one way of enabling the private sector to act like a financer and implementer could be PPP, that is public-private partnership. So this kind of planning which India has adopted since the 1991 reforms is also referred to as indicative planning. So as you can see that from 1947 to 1991, India was following imperative planning model, whereas presently India has been following the model of indicative planning. Now since the nature of planning in India has changed from imperative to indicative, accordingly it was felt that there is a need to change the institutional mechanism as well, because the planning commission was more suitable for the imperative planning. So hence one of the main reason for replacing the planning commission by NITI AAYOG would be NITI AAYOG would now be focusing on the indicative planning in India. Now having understood the first reason for replacing planning commission by NITI AAYOG, let us move to the other reasons. Now coming to the second reason, the NITI AAYOG would be acting as a think tank for the government, which means the NITI AAYOG would be providing policy inputs to the government with respect to various policies. As a think tank, the NITI AAYOG would be acting as an advisory body for various policies to be implemented in India. The third reason being that the NITI AAYOG would be acting as a systems reform commission. The NITI AAYOG's role would be to highlight various loopholes in the implementation of government schemes and programs, which also means that the NITI AAYOG would be carrying out a critical analysis of all the government schemes and programs in order to improve their implementation mechanism. Now this particular idea of NITI AAYOG acting as a systems reforms commission has been borrowed from the institution in China known as National Development and Reform Commission. Now these are the three main reasons for replacing the planning commission by NITI AAYOG. Now coming to the second part, wherein we'll be analyzing whether the NITI AAYOG has been able to fulfill its objectives. Now firstly, this article highlights that the NITI AAYOG has been able to fulfill its role as a think tank, wherein it highlights certain achievements. The first achievement being the NITI AAYOG's policy inputs for the implementation of Ayushman Bharat scheme. The second policy input is with respect to what should be the government's approach towards the artificial intelligence. And third achievement is the NITI AAYOG's proposal to formulate a draft bill to establish National Medical Commission. Further, the article highlights that the NITI AAYOG has not only acted as a think tank, but it has also acted as an action think tank, which means that NITI AAYOG has been able to act as an agent of change and development in India. The second major achievement of NITI AAYOG is with respect to its role as a systems reforms commission. Now, as you know, one of the main reasons for poor implementation of government schemes and programs is because of lack of coordination between the center and state. So it is in this particular aspect that NITI AAYOG has been able to bring about a improved coordination between various stakeholders for the implementation of government schemes and programs, thus improving their effectiveness. The third achievement of NITI AAYOG has been that NITI AAYOG has been able to provide for enhanced accountability. Now this is because earlier when 5-year plans were evaluated only after they ended, and this had mainly two problems. Firstly, the evaluation at the end of the plans did not provide for any real accountability, and secondly, there was no scope for mid-course correction. Now, in order to avoid this problem of lack of accountability, the NITI AAYOG has developed a separate office known as Development Monitoring and Evaluation Office. And this particular office collects the data on a real-time basis. And this collection of data provides for enhanced accountability and also provides for mid-course correction during the implementation of the 5-year plans. The fourth achievement which has been highlighted in the article is that the NITI AAYOG has been able to promote both competitive as well as cooperative federalism. Now this competitive federalism can be seen in the fact that the NITI AAYOG has been publishing performance-based ranking of the different states in India. This has in turn instilled a spirit of competition among the states in India. And secondly, the NITI Aayog has highlighted some of the best practices of the states in India. Now these practices can be in turn adopted by the other states. This particular aspect shows that the states have to learn from each other, thus showing the spirit of cooperative federalism. The fifth achievement has been the NITI Aayog's focus on improving innovation in India. In this aspect, the article highlights that the NITI Aayog has launched a mission known as Atal Innovation Mission, which also stands for AIM, in order to promote innovation in India. Thus, with respect to the achievements of NITI Aayog, it can be stated that the NITI Aayog has led to efficient, transparent, innovative and accountable governance in India. Let us now look at some of the criticisms against the working of the NITI Aayog. As we have discussed, the NITI Aayog should act as a think tank providing policy inputs to the government. However, the article highlights that the NITI Aayog does not wield any influence over the policy making. In this aspect, the article highlights that both GST as well as demonetization were implemented by the government without taking any kind of inputs from the NITI Aayog. Now, with respect to second criticism, we discussed that NITI Aayog should act as a systems reform commission wherein it has to critically evaluate the government schemes and programs. However, the article states that the NITI Aayog has been unable to carry out the critical review of the government schemes and programs. Now, these are the two criticisms which have been stated with respect to the functioning of NITI Aayog in India. Now, from the topic, the prelims question for your practice would be, consider the following statements related to indicative planning in India. The first statement is, the indicative planning was adopted by India after the LPG reforms in 1991. The second statement is, indicative planning calls for government to act as coordinator, enabler and facilitator for the private sector in order to bring about development in India. Which of the statements given above is or are correct? Please give your answer in the comment section given below. Let us now look at the mains question for your practice. Discuss the reasons for replacing Planning Commission by NITI Aayog. Do you think NITI Aayog has been able to fulfill its mandate? Discuss. Now you can try writing the answer to this particular question by looking at the video analysis. So as part of this topic, firstly we discussed as to what are the reasons for replacing the Planning Commission by NITI Aayog, and secondly we analyze whether the NITI Aayog has been able to fulfill its objectives. Having understood this article, let us now move to the next article. Now this particular article has been taken from page number 7. The title of the article is, Nearly 1 lakh winged visitors arrive at Bengal Sanctuary. This particular article shall be important from the perspective of GS Paper 3, Environment, under the subsection Conservation, Environmental Pollution and Degradation. Now this particular article has appeared in the context of visit of highest number of migratory bird species to a wildlife sanctuary known as Raiganj. Now this wildlife sanctuary is located in the state of West Bengal. Further, the article highlights that according to a recent survey which was carried out in the Raiganj Wildlife Sanctuary, the majority of the bird species belong to the open bill stock. Now since UPSC normally asks questions with respect to wildlife sanctuary as well as various bird species, one would be required to understand about the Raiganj Wildlife Sanctuary as well as about the open bill stock. Now let us look at some details related to the Raiganj Wildlife Sanctuary. Now this particular sanctuary, as discussed, is situated in the state of West Bengal. It is situated in a place called as Raiganj, which is part of North Dinajpur district of West Bengal. Further, this particular sanctuary is also referred to as Kulik Bird Sanctuary because the river Kulik passes through the fringes of this particular sanctuary, thus providing a breeding ground for the birds. Secondly, most of the bird species visit this sanctuary in the month of June and they stay till the month of November. That is when the temperature drops. Further, the article highlights that the census which was carried out this year has recorded highest number of bird species in this particular sanctuary. What is also encouraging is that there has been increase in the number of species over the past several years. Now these are some of the aspects which one would be required to remember for the prelims. Now let us try to understand certain basics related to open bill stocks. Now coming to the description of the Asian open bill stocks. Now these Asian open bill stocks are predominantly either grey or white in color. Further, these birds have a gap between a lower and upper mandible, and because of the gap between the upper and lower mandible, they are referred to as the open bill storks. With respect to their habitat and distribution, these storks are mainly found in the Indian subcontinent and Southeast Asia. Further, these birds are mainly found on the inland wetlands and very rarely along the river banks. And finally, with respect to IUCN classification, these birds are presently categorized as least concern. Now, these are some of the aspects which one would be required to know about the Asian open-bill stocks. Now, let us look at some of the previous year prelims question related to this particular topic. Now, this was a question asked in the prelims 2011. The question was, two important rivers, one with its source in Jharkhand and the other with its source in Odisha, merge at a place only a short distance from the coast of Bay of Bengal before flowing into the sea. This is an important site of wildlife and biodiversity and a protected area. Which among the following could be this? So the answer to this particular question is Bhitarkanika, and this was a question asked in the prelims 2017. The question was, if you want to see gharials in their natural habitat, which one of the following is the best places to visit? An answer to this particular question is B, that is Chambal River. So as you can see in the prelims 2017, the UPSC had specifically asked question related to the gharials. On the similar line, one can also expect question on the open bill stocks, which we have discussed. Now, having understood about this particular article, let us now move to the next article. Now, this particular article has been taken from page number 7. The title of the article is Sex Offenders Registry Launched with 4.4 lakh entries. This article shall be important from the perspective of GS Paper 2 Governance under the subtopic Government Policies and Intervention for Development in Various Sectors and Issues Arising out of their Design and Implementation. Now, this particular article has appeared in the context of the release of National Database on the Sexual Offenders by the government. Now, by releasing this database, India has become the 9th country in the world to have a separate database dealing with the sexual offenders. Further, the proposal to have a separate database was first mooted in India after the Nirbhaya gang rape case in the year 2012. So as part of this video analysis, firstly we will be understanding as to what exactly is National Database on Sexual Offenders, and secondly as to how this particular database would help India in order to prevent the sexual offences. Now let us look at some details related to National Sex Offenders Registry in terms of what, who and how. Now coming to the first part as to what details will be stored in the registry. Now this particular registry shall include details such as name, address, photograph and fingerprint details of those people who are convicted in the sexual assault cases. Further, this particular database would be maintained by National Crime Records Bureau. As to who can access this particular data, now presently this database can be accessed only by the law enforcement agencies. Further, this database is not accessible by the general public. Presently, the countries such as US, UK, Canada, Australia, Ireland, New Zealand, South Africa, Trinidad and Tobago have already set up a similar database, and India would become the 9th country to have a database dealing with the list of sexual offenders. Now with respect to how long the data would be stored, now this particular registry has mainly 3 different durations depending upon the dangers posed by the people who are convicted in various sexual assault cases. For example, for the people who are deemed as low danger, the data would be stored for 15 years. For the people who are categorized as belonging to the moderate danger, the data would be stored for 25 years. And for the people who are considered to be habitual offenders, as well as the people who are involved in the gang rape cases, their data would be stored for the entire lifetime. And presently, this particular registry contains 4.4 lakh entries of all the convicts from the year 2005. Now, having understood about the details of National Sex Offenders Registry, let us now try to understand as to how this particular registry would help India. Now, once this particular registry is created and updated, it would require all the sexual offenders whose name is included in the registry to periodically report to the police, wherein these people would be required to inform about their residence, employment as well as other details. Now this would enable police in India to keep a close watch on all the sexual offenders. Further, the setting up of such registries in other countries has enabled them to keep a tab on the sexual offenders, and thus it has led to the prevention of sexual assault cases in those countries. Further, the importance of this case registry can be seen with the fact that last year, one person in Delhi had confessed to the court that he had raped around 100 girls over a period of 10 years. Now, this particular person was a habitual offender who was previously convicted of sexual offences. The importance of this particular registry can be understood from the fact that if this registry was available before, wouldn't have committed so many crimes in India. Now coming to the way forward, according to a data released by National Crime Records Bureau in the year 2015, the rate of conviction for the rapes in India is extremely low at 29%. Further, the rate of pendency for the rape cases is as high as 86.2%. So the lower conviction rates, higher pendency for the rape cases point out that the investigation in India is weak with respect to rape-related cases. Further, the institutional machinery to handle the rape-related cases is also extremely weaker. So accordingly, setting up of National Sex Offenders Registry is only one of the steps which the government can take in order to prevent sexual assault cases. The government should also ensure that conviction rates as well as the pendency of rape-related cases should improve in order to reduce the cases related to sexual assault. So having understood about the details related to National Database on Sexual Offenders and as to how this database would help India in preventing sexual offences, let us now move to the next article. Now this particular article has been taken from page number 9. The title of the article is Protecting Person with HIV/AIDS. This particular article shall be important from the perspective of GS Paper 2 Governance under the subsection of Government Policies and Interventions. Let us now look at the context of this particular article. Earlier, the Parliament of India had passed the HIV Act 2017 with twofold objective of preventing and controlling HIV/AIDS in India. Accordingly, the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare has issued a notification in order to bring the HIV Act into force, and this act came into force on September 10th. So as part of this video analysis, firstly we will understand as to what was the need for the Parliament to pass a law to deal with the HIV/AIDS, and secondly we will understand certain basic provisions of this particular act. Now coming to the need for HIV Act in India. Now according to UN AIDS report, there are approximate 2.11 million people who are living with HIV in India. Now these 2.11 million people face multifaceted challenges in India. Firstly, these people face social stigma in the Indian society. Secondly, these people are also discriminated in terms of access to education, healthcare as well as jobs. Thirdly, these people also lack access to treatment such as antiretroviral therapy. So the HIV Act 2017, which has been passed by the Parliament, seeks to address these multifaceted challenges which we have discussed. Let us now look at the provisions of the HIV Act. Now the most important aspect of this particular act is that it makes antiretroviral therapy a legal right for all the HIV/AIDS patients in India. Now this means that the people who are suffering from HIV cannot be denied treatment in the hospitals, and it becomes a legal right for the people to receive the antiretroviral therapy. Further, the act states that every person who is in the care and the custody of the state shall have the right to HIV prevention, testing, treatment as well as counseling. So this particular act not only provides legal right for treatment, but also the legal right here includes the right with respect to the prevention, testing as well as the counseling. Thus, this particular act has broadened the ambit of the legal right of the HIV/AIDS patients. Further, it asks the central as well as the state government to provide the HIV/AIDS treatment along with the infection management. Also, it asks the central as well as state government to formulate certain welfare schemes for the benefit of the HIV/AIDS patient. And in order to prevent discrimination against the HIV/AIDS patients, the bill defines as to what can count as a discrimination against the HIV positive people and the people who are living with it. It lists that denial or discontinuation of employment, education, healthcare services, renting or residing property, and standing for public or private office will be counted as a discrimination, along with the unfair treatment in any of the above mentioned categories. Thus, apart from providing the treatment for the HIV/AIDS patient, it also seeks to end the discrimination which the HIV/AIDS patients face. Further, one important aspect of the bill is it prohibits the HIV testing being used as a prerequisite, that is a precondition for securing a job, accessing healthcare or a education, which means that no entity in India can carry out the HIV testing for providing education, healthcare or the jobs. And the next aspect of this bill is it gives the right to the minors to reside in a shared household and prohibits people from spreading any kind of hate against those minors. Now, considering the fact that there is a lot of taboo related to the HIV/AIDS disease in India, the bill states that no person shall have to undergo HIV test or medical treatment without one's informed consent. Now, this informed consent of the person is extremely important because here a person would be required to disclose his HIV status only when if he is required by a court order. And in order to ensure the implementation of these provisions of the Act provides that a ombudsman or a grievance redressal body shall have to be appointed by each and every state government. Now, this body shall inquire into the complaints related to the violation of the Act and provision of healthcare services. And this ombudsman shall be required to submit a report to the state government every 6 months, wherein in the report it is required to state the number and the nature of complaints received and the action which has been taken by the ombudsman. Now, these are the provisions of the bill which you would be required to remember from the exam perspective. Let us now discuss about a program known as National AIDS Control Program, which has been started by India in order to reduce the HIV infections. Now, this National AIDS Control Program was started in the year 1992, and this program is considered to be one of the most comprehensive programs launched by the government for prevention and control of HIV/AIDS in India. Now, so far, we have implemented 4 phases under National AIDS Control Program, wherein the phase 1 of the program started in the year 1992 and ended in the year 1999, where the main focus of the phase 1 program was on slowing down the new HIV infections in India. And phase 2 program started in the year 1999 and it ended in 2007. And the main focus of the phase 2 program was on increasing India's capacity to deal with the HIV/AIDS infection. And the phase 3 of this particular program started in 2007 and ended in 2012, where the focus of this particular program was on halting and reversing the spread of HIV/AIDS. And presently, we are implementing phase 4 of this particular program, which has started in the year 2012. Now, the target under this phase 4 program is the government intends to reduce the new infections related to HIV/AIDS by almost 50%. Now, these are the 4 phases of National AIDS Control Program which you would be required to remember. Now, in this video analysis, so far we have discussed as to why the HIV Act has been passed as well as the provisions of the HIV Act. Now, having understood about this particular article, let us now move to the next article. Now, this particular article has been taken from page number 7, wherein the title of the article states that a dozen lions have died in the Gir forest. This particular article shall be important from the perspective of GS Paper 3 Environment under the subsection Conservation, Environmental Pollution and Degradation. So the death of the lions in the Gir forest brings back the focus on the lion reintroduction project which the government had sought to introduce. So it is in this aspect, let us look at certain brief details related to the lion reintroduction project as well as about the Gir forest. Now, this Asiatic lion reintroduction project was first mooted in the year 2002. Now, this particular project seeks to provide safeguards to the Asiatic lion from the extinction in the wild through the relocation. And the reason why the government intends to relocate the lions is because presently the Gir National Park happens to be the only habitat for the wild lions, and these lions are increasingly facing risk with respect to epidemics, natural disaster as well as man-animal conflict. So since these lions are facing risk in a single habitat, this particular reintroduction project aims to establish second independent home for the lions in the Kuno Palpur Wildlife Sanctuary in Madhya Pradesh, which means this particular project intends to shift some of the lions from the Gir National Park to the Kuno Palpur Wildlife Sanctuary in the Madhya Pradesh. However, this particular project has not been completed because of the opposition by the state of Gujarat. Let us look at some details related to the Gir forest. Now, the entire forest area of the Gir National Park is dry and deciduous, and because of this, it provides the best habitat for the Asiatic lions. Further, Gir is also famous for leopards, sambar, that is Indian deer, chausinga, which is the world's only 4-horned antelope, jackal, striped hyena and Indian fox. Further, Gir National Park has a very rich flora wherein it provides shelter to more than 200 species of And moreover, the sanctuary has been declared as an important bird area by the Indian Bird Conservation Network. Further, Gir is also an habitat for certain critically endangered species such as white-backed and long-billed vultures in India. Further, in the vicinity of Gil, a very famous dam is located called as Kamleshwar Dam. Now this Kamleshwar Dam is famous because this is considered to be the best spot where marsh crocodile can be seen in the large numbers. Now these are some important details related to the Gir forest. Let us now look at some of the related prelims questions from this particular topic. Now both these questions were asked in the prelims 2017. Now coming to the first question. The question was, recently there was a proposal to translocate some of the lions from their natural habitat in Gujarat to which of the following sites. Now we already discussed about this. So the answer in this particular case is B, that is Kuno Palpur Wildlife Sanctuary. Similarly, another related question here is the term M stripes is sometimes seen in the news in the context of, and the answer to this particular question is maintenance of tiger reserves. So having understood about this particular article, let us now move to the next article. Now this particular article has been taken from page number 9, wherein this particular article discusses about an economic term known as capital structure. So let us try to understand this capital structure from the perspective of prelims. Now a company can raise capital mainly through two ways, that is through equity as well as debt. Now equity here means a company can raise capital through the issue of shares, whereas debt here refers to the raising of capital through issue of corporate bonds. Now the capital structure here refers to the proportion of equity and debt which is used by the company in order to raise capital. That is, it deals with what proportion of the capital is raised through equity and debt by the company in order to finance its operations. Further, some of the companies can rely only on issue of shares in order to raise capital, while others may rely only on issue of corporate bonds to raise capital. So this refers to different capital structure of the companies. Now a company which has got a higher proportion of debt as compared to its equity, such companies would be required to pay back the loans to its investors, and hence they are considered to be more riskier. Now these are some of the aspects which one would be required to know with respect to the capital structure. Now coming to the next article which appears on page number 12. The title of the article is Moon Kim Visit Sacred Mountain in the Show of Unity. So in this particular article there has been a reference to a mountain known as Mount Paektu. So this particular mountain shall be important from the perspective of GS Paper 1 Geography of the World under the subsection Salient Features of World's Physical Geography. So here from the prelims perspective, let us discuss some details related to Mount Paektu. Now as you can see here, this particular mountain is located on the China-North Korea border. This particular mountain is considered to be an active volcano and also one of the highest mountain peak of the Korean peninsula. Now this particular mountain peak has one of the largest crater lake known as Haven Lake. Now this particular mountain peak and the crater lake here is considered to be sacred in the Korean peninsula, and hence the meeting between the two presidents took place on this particular mountain peak. Now these are some of the aspects which one would be required to remember from the exam perspective. Now let us look at some of the prelims questions related to the world geography. Now both these questions with respect to world geography were asked in the prelims 2018. So looking at the first question here, consider the following pairs: the town sometimes mentioned in the news and the country in which they are located. Now Aleppo is located in Syria. Now Kirkuk and Mosul are located in Iraq. Mazar-e-Sharif is located in Afghanistan. So looking at the options here, the correct answer is 1 and 4 only. That is Aleppo and Mazar-e-Sharif, which are correctly matched to the countries in which they are located. Now coming to the second question here, consider the following pairs: the region sometimes mentioned in the news and the country in which they are located. Now Catalonia is located in Spain. However, Crimea is not part of Hungary. Mindanao is part of Philippines, whereas Oromia is part of Ethiopia. So looking at the options here, the correct answer would be 1 and 3 only. That is Catalonia and Mindanao. With this, we have come to end of today's discussion. Now let us look at the question for the day.